Welcome to this week's episode, Eye of the Beholder. I am your host, Dulce Crystal Ortiz, and in this week's episode, we're going to discuss how our own personal power center, majority of the times, it seems to be missing or misplaced or tucked away in a space where we have done this either subconsciously or consciously in order to protect ourselves from causing any hurt or damage to that part of ourselves. In this week's episode, talking about our power center, whenever you hear that term power center, what is it that you first comes to mind in a way? Is it the physical aspect of power itself, or is it control? Is it manipulation? Is it something good to behold, or is it something that scares you deep down? These are a lot of emotions I've come to find that are associated with the power center, and it's very interesting to see how in a majority of a lot of my sessions with clients, the power center in itself seems to always be sort of misplaced. Now, it is believed that when it comes to the spiritual aspect of oneself, that our power center is never really truly gone. It is sometimes in the place that it needs to be. Sometimes, a majority of the time, it's actually given away subconsciously, if that makes any sense. So depending on the frequency that one person is in, if they are in a very low state, or even a majority of the time I've noticed that it does have to do with before birth as well. If the parents that are giving birth to us are not carrying their power center, a lot of the times when they have children, energetically, they actually begin to sort of feed off of and take the power center of that child before they're even born. Or sometimes when it is that they are born at a very young age, the parents subconsciously, because of traumas or programming, whatever it is, take the power center of the child. Chakras are known as like energetic points within our body that go along the spine. This starts from the base of the spine going up to the crown of the head. So the power center is associated with the solar plexus. Solar plexus is actually right at under the chest, right before the abdomen. So it's somewhere in that space. And it's interesting because if you look into the solar plexus and its function, the way that it's powered, the solar plexus within ourselves, it is heavily associated with our parental figures. It has to do a lot with our parents and how we view ourselves through their eyes, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of like a image or an idea of how we think we are perceived by our parents, because each person has their own perception, their own biases, their own ideas, their own image of each person. They're not going to see each person as a whole of who they really are, if that makes sense. It's like we only see different facets of a person, and we base our idea off of those facets that we see of each person. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's not even true. It has to do with perception, and perception it's not always right. A majority of the time, it's very wrong. And again, it's geared and controlled by how it is that we view that person. So, like that whole saying of when you meet a person, the first 5 seconds, I believe, you'll know if you will like them or not in some sort of level, right? So how well is it that you can know a person in just 5 seconds? I mean, you can, depending on your intuition, how strong it is and how fair it is. And a lot of the other times, it's energetically, it could be that you dislike a person right off the bat because that person has something to teach you. And it's not that they're bad, it's that they're going to rub you the wrong way, in that there's some part of you that is unhealed and that you need to look at. So it's going to make you feel like you don't want to be near that person, if that makes any sense. again, the perception that we have of each person that we meet, it is a lot of the times very, very wrong, in that it doesn't allow us to view the person as a whole and only view the person in a certain light, a certain way. At the same time, it's also helpful to us because it allows us to be more in tune with ourselves and what is it that we sense from the people around us, to sort of, be more connected to that part of ourselves. But going back to the power center, when we are children, we see our parents, our parental figures, whoever raised us, as, the beings that could not do any wrong in a way, right? Because when you're young, you're a child, you're innocent, and you still have yet to know how a lot of traumas and a lot of baggage that our parents carry have affected them in the way that they move through the world and how they also raise us. So when we look at our parents, what is it that comes to mind? Do you feel like you have a relationship that is filled with a lot of friction? Do you feel like you have no desire to be around them because anytime you are around them, it feels as though you hold no power in that relationship, in that dynamic? Does it feel as though you have to be the parent around them, the one that is always in control compared to them? Whatever it is that you are sensing, it is because that's kind of like how the dynamic ended up coming to be, because of the power center that we may have given away subconsciously, or we may have misplaced. Now, this is interesting because it is believed that energy in itself, it can never be destroyed, it can never be created, but it can always be sort of shifted, changed, altered in a way, but it's always present. So when it comes to our power center, we have the gift of being able to pursue it, to find it, to regain it whenever it is that we're ready to do so. And a lot of the times we may subconsciously not want to have our power center back in its rightful place because there is maybe some fear associated with it. It takes a lot of responsibility to, take hold of oneself, be responsible for oneself in that way, and holding your own power. A lot of clients that I've had, I would say a majority of them so far, and even myself included, I've noticed that there was sort of a little bit of a repetition going on that happened, that targeted the power center. I noticed that there was what appeared to be many generations, that the generation that ended up losing its power center, not losing, or was misplaced, when they had children, after that, it's like there was a repetition that went through the generations, where the parent would take the power from their child, and then the child had the lack of power, so when they had children, they ended up taking it from their children, and so on and so on. I did notice that there were a lot of clients that I've had the privilege of being in session with them, and I have noticed that there is a correlation between how the generations, when one parent is lacking their power center, it really does influence how the child, when they become adults, how scared they are of looking within and also changing and creating change, like with their children when they have them. It's not to say that they can't, it's that it takes a lot more courage because they don't feel like they have sort of like the capabilities to do that. And it's just something that ends up being passed down through the generations. So with our first story of an example of the power center that we carry, it is the power center. It is the beautiful part of ourselves as human beings, where it's like we can know who it is that we are at our core, and we have the ability to have control over our internal world in a way that we may not have if we didn't have our power center. So this is really interesting in how it really builds and connects us to who it is that we wish to be when we become adults. And because it's always a choice whether we wish to repeat what we've learned or to learn from it and create a different atmosphere for those that come after us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, children. It also, it does have to do with ourselves. It always is about ourselves at the end of the day, internally. If we're able to change and shift our viewpoint of how we view ourselves, then the power begins to shift. We no longer are controlled by negative programs that cause us to act in ways that we wish that we wouldn't. And with that, we'll go into our first story. Our first story has to do with a lovely woman that came in for hypnotherapy. I've noticed that she had this tendency to kind of be like on the go over and over again. It's like she never really took rest. And when that happened, it's like she had a very lovely personality, but I could tell that it's like there was like this hyperactivity that was going on all the time, and she was never able to give herself like moments of rest. So when she did come in to do these sessions, because the person doesn't go into such a deep state of relaxation, hypnosis, a lot of the times, it helps with being able to go into a deep sleep, the conscious mind, because it's in such a protected space. It feels that it's able to rest well. And I noticed that with her, she would come in her conscious mind, she would automatically like go to sleep. But her subconscious mind, it's always active. It's always running in the background. That's the part of ourselves that even if we are in a deep sleep, if we hear an alarm go off, like we're going to wake up, right? That's the part of ourselves, the subconscious, that is always running it and never goes to bed. It always captures all of the information around us. So it captures, sounds. It can capture, even again, if we're in a deep sleep. And consciously, we may not remember, but there are some times where we can recall certain moments, even though we are in that deep state. So when she comes in, she goes to sleep right away, and I'm able to tap into her subconscious mind. And we ended up finding out that one of her main triggers was her relationship with her parents, and it was with both. Although if she were to talk about her parents, she did have this idolization in regards to her father, and she had a lot of anger and resentment towards her mother. From what I understood, the relationship that her parents had is that they were not a happy couple. They had gotten together very young, and they had children very young. And neither one really did live their life on their own, ever. So over time, the wife, who was slightly younger than the husband, she ended up wanting to separate and wanting to divorce. But by the time she decided this, everyone was already older. All the children, my client included, they already had their families, they already had their children. And when that separation happened, she held such an anger and resentment towards the mother, because the mother was the one that made that decision. The husband didn't even fight. It's like he didn't really care if she was there or not. And, whatever their dynamic was, they were both, I'm going to guess, they both just wanted to live their lives, what they had left of it, and enjoy it the way they wanted to. Because one of the things that the mom shared with the daughter was that she didn't decide to leave her husband earlier because she wanted to sort of give the image of the parents being together. Even though they were unhappy with each other, she wanted to allow the children to have that image of their parents being together until she felt like, well, they were older, they had their own responsibilities, their own children. Then she thought that they would understand her decision at that point. The mom, when she ended up separating, the daughter ended up really resenting her and even having an anger towards her, to why she would, do that, especially to her father, because again, she did idolize her father. But when I did ask her what kind of relationship she had with her dad, she didn't really have a strong relationship with him either. It's kind of like she was disconnected from having a very close relationship with either of her parents, but she felt more open to being hostile towards her mother than she was towards her father. Even though, again, she didn't have a very close relationship with her dad. She had one probably more so with her mother. And it's interesting because I did also read this article where it said that the child, whichever parent the child feels the most secure with, that's the parent that will actually get like the worst version of their child, if that makes sense. So the reason for that is that within the mind of a child at a young age, they try to see where it is that they can feel the most themselves with. And the majority of the time, it will be one of the parents. Hopefully it's one of the parents. And it will be that parent specifically that they are the most closest to emotionally, where they will be the most emotional with, right? Because they feel they're safe. So they can allow themselves to be seen in their most high emotional state. So it could be anger, sadness, whatever it is that the child feels. And hopefully over time, once that relationship is established and the child grows, a lot of the time, as adults, then they continue to have that relationship. They continue to have see that parent, the closest one that they're to. They will get the most backlash if there is something going on that the child is not happy about. So in this case, it kind of did show that the article had some truth to it, because the daughter was closest to the mother, but because she was closest, she felt like she unconsciously, of course, or subconsciously, she was able to do this. Because when I did point it out to her, what I saw from a third party, she hadn't realized that she was actually giving her father more leeway because she didn't feel emotionally connected to him as much as she did her mother. And then, when I asked her to look at why she felt so angry towards her mother, when it was, her parents are getting older and they just wanted to live what time they have left to be content with themselves. And her response was that she didn't want them to break the image that she had of their family. At the end of the day, she was able to admit it. So, I am proud of her for that, because she recognized it. She recognized what part of her was hurt, in pain. When we ended up doing one of our sessions together, it came up that her power center was actually missing. It was closely associated with her mother. And it also ended up coming out that she had like some fear towards her father. So, and also there was a tendency within the family where the father would always fault the mother for everything. So that was also another dynamic to take into account, was that she grew up faulting the mom whenever something was wrong, because that's what her other parent would do. And, she also did come from a country where it was very, where men were very dominant. So, she grew up with that idea, that dynamic. And I guess that's why it was also easier for her to begin to fault her mother when she decided she didn't want to be with the dad anymore. Mind you, again, she is older. She is like in her 40s, I believe, at this time. And she has her own children. She has her own family. But the image that she had created from such a young age when she was little of her family dynamic, when it was broken, or had changed. It wasn't that it was broken, it's just that it shifted and changed into another version. She just couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept it. She didn't want to accept it. And she fought it so hard within herself that it ended up causing her to have this rage and this resentment towards her mother. We ended up going into a very deep state at one point, where we did find that her power center was misplaced. And it was misplaced at a young age because subconsciously she had ended up giving it to her mother, because again, she was more closer to her mother, and from when she was little, she would always be around her mom energetically. Children know what it is that goes on with the parents in when they go through such an array of emotions, children are very, very perceptive to that. Even though they may not know the direct reason or the detail or put a word to it, they can feel it and sense it. So she knew that her mother, the years that she was with her father, she wasn't happy. She didn't like the dynamic that they had, but she endured it because she wanted her children to have a family. My client, when she was little, she ended up passing over her power center to her mother to try to help her to feel like to help her in a way, right? Whenever it is that we feel like we want to help someone, we begin to take on more responsibility for the other person emotionally than we should. So she ended up doing that at a very young age. And again, when we're in the state of hypnosis, we're able to find when it happened. And she was very young, a toddler at the time, but she had given her power center over to her mother. And being in that deep state, we also ended up looking to where her power center was. So it was with her mom. We even asked her mom where her power center was so that we could get it back. And it turns out that she ended up giving it to her mom when she was little as well. So there it is, like that pattern that ended up happening between them. And it happened between the daughters more than anything. So we ended up helping to get the mother to get her power center back. We got back the client's power center and we brought it to where hers is. We ended up finding out that because my client had a daughter as well, she was actually more consciously aware of how she was treating her daughter and her son, because she had one of each. And when she came up out of that session, she did say how she was very proud of her daughter for being as strong as she is, but at times she felt like she would be more harder on her than her son. She didn't realize that she was as hard until she did this therapy. And she realized that she was actually taking her daughter's power from her as well. Unconsciously, subconsciously, she was stifling her daughter from voicing what it is that, she felt emotionally, or from being herself. And she made a connection in that session where she found that that's kind of what happened with her. And she was repeating the same action with her children. She made it a point after that session, I remember she said that she loved her daughter's strength and how she's very open with not being okay with things if she sees something wrong is happening, if that makes any sense. Whenever the daughter saw some kind of form of injustice being done, little kids, like on the playground or something, like she would voice it and bring it to an adult's attention. She would want things to always be just, in a way, you could say. And sometimes my client, the mom, she would want to sort of stop her from making a scene, if that makes any sense. Because, that's how she was raised, in a way. And again, she didn't want her daughter to do that, to guard her attention or to sort of voice what is wrong, what is happening that is wrong. Because a lot of the times when she was younger, she was stifled. And it's just, an act of repetition that ends up happening through the generations. But in this example, the power center, when it was returned, she ended up being able to have a better relationship with her mother. She ended up being able to have a better relationship with her daughter as well. Because of such anger and resentment that she had, she ended up being able to get rid of it completely. She said after that session, it did take her a few times of talking with her mother to really understand her side of the story, to where she was able to finally let go with what was happening. She no longer faulted her mother for the relationship that her parents had. She wanted to have control because she felt like it was an image that she had created of her family, and she thought that it was broken. But, after she learned that she was able to still have her parents as her parents, they weren't together, but they're still her parents. She understood that whatever happens between them in their dynamic, it doesn't change the fact that her parents will always be there for her in the way that she's known. So she ended up having a better relationship with her mom, and she was mending the relationship she had with her daughter as well. because her daughter was still so very young. She was still, I believe the daughter was like about 7 or so at the time, 7 or 8. So she was still able to, fix a lot of the things that she may have caused damage to her daughter. And emotionally, she was able to emotionally help a lot of the issues that she may have caused between her and her daughter. And she began to, be more consciously aware of how she was treating, like the different ways she was treating her son and her daughter. And again, when it comes to the power center, it's such an amazing thing because it is associated with the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is associated with our parental figures, mainly the parents that had us and raised us, and how we view ourselves through their eyes again. So it's not always going to be right. I mean, probably a majority of the time it's not going to be right at all, because the way that we view our parents, the image we have of them, the perception we have of them, it isn't right either. It's because, we are their children and we grew up seeing them, viewing them in a certain way, but it's not the full picture. Our parents had lives before us. They are their own individual people. And I think it's funny how even though we can become adults, we can have our own children, our perception of our parents never changes in a way, right? Like we will always see them kind of the same way as when we were young children. And that's not right, because we're not allowing them to be people in a way. We're not allowing them to be who it is that they really are. And they're, as parents, they are filled with faults. They do the best they can with what they know. And a lot of the times when people become parents, they're not necessarily ready. They're just living life, and a lot of mistakes are made. But at the same time, it's like they did the best they could. Being open and grasping those moments where we can see our parents for the people that they are, the faulty people that they are. We can be grateful and thankful for the good that they showed, and also for the bad and the mistakes they did, because that gives us sort of a guideline to where we can choose to be different, do something different with what we were taught, we were shown. So another story that I have that has to do with the power center has to do with a man that came in for a hypnosis session. And this man, he was someone who was already in his 60s, 70s, around that age. And he was always someone who was pretty open to like trying different things throughout his life. The reason he also did come in was because he was having a lot of issues with his kidneys, mainly. He had a lot of stones building up, and at some point the doctors were saying that they would probably a large operation on him. And that was something that he didn't want to do. If he could avoid it, doing anything surgical, he did his best to make changes in his life. So when he came in, he had heard that hypnotherapy could help with the emotional blockages that also are sort of correlated with the physical form. An interesting bit when it comes to kidneys is that the kidneys are associated with and expelling a lot of toxins that we carry. But one of the main things that the kidneys actually emotionally are connected to, it has to do with fear. It is one of the biggest indicators that when someone is probably having issues with their kidneys, it's because they carry a lot of a lot of fear, a lot of nervousness, a lot of anxiety. A lot of the times it takes different forms, but at the base of it is fear. And this person that came in, he was someone who we just decided to do just hypnosis and finding out like what is the thing that is causing his kidneys to sort of build up, like have these blocks happen so regularly inside of him. And we ended up actually finding out that it had pertained to also his power center. The thing is, he said he grew up in another country where it was very dangerous at the time when he was very little. So He had wanted to help his family, his parents, as best he could from a very young age. So at a very young age, like, he went to work, like, as a young child at like 5, 6 years old. He tried to like work around the neighborhood that he lived in to help his family because they were going through a very rough time. And he noticed that his parents, mainly his father, was a very aggressive drinker, and his mom was also aggressive in her way. It wasn't correlated to alcohol. She was just very hard on all of the children, and the father was aggressive when he became drunk. So he grew up with a lot of fear towards his parents. But before he even realized that he had fear towards them, as a child, you know, you want to be good for them. You want to do anything you can to help them as best you can. You know, when you're a little kid, like under the age of 4 or 5 years old, you want to innocently be of assistance in any way, not knowing or realizing that, you know, these adults are acting the way they are because they're allowing themselves to be run by a program that was embedded in their subconscious through whatever experiences they had been through. So from a young age, he made himself very responsible, and he tried to take care of his parents, but he had a lot of fear towards them, and that fear never went away. His parents, of course, were long gone by the time I'm doing the session with him, but the emotions weren't. All the emotions that were related to his family, well, his parents mainly, they never went away. He had a lot of fear towards them. And he was very, like, soft-spoken, which was interesting to me because it's like I never really hear a man be soft-spoken. But he was very, you know, gentle with his words, kind of like he didn't want to sound aggressive in any way. He didn't want you to feel uncomfortable with him. And he was very respectful with his words as well, which is something I noticed. And it's like, oh, okay, so maybe like the reason why he was speaking in this tone and using these words was because maybe, again, the fear that was embedded within his system was kind of subconsciously pushing him to be this way so that he could be perceived as a non-threat. Again, because the dynamic that he had in his family with his parents was that, you know, they always were aggressive towards him. So some part of his subconscious, it ended up creating this tone, these words, so that they wouldn't get attacked. He wouldn't get attacked, if that makes any sense. Because, you know, he was attacked very often when he was a little kid. It was emotional, it was psychological, it was verbal abuse. It was all kinds. And considering, you know, he lived for such a long period of time, he was a very kind person to his family when he had his children, when he had his wife. When we were doing the therapy, it ended up coming out that his parents came up in the hypnosis session. They came up and he was able to sort of have like a dialogue with them where he was able to share like his fears and his sadness and his regrets that he couldn't do when they were alive. And in the process of doing that, it unblocked a lot of the fear that he was carrying inside of him, because he never was able to do that when they were alive. But giving him the opportunity now in a space to where he could do that, it was very healing, and it unblocked a lot of the fear that he carried. And at the same time, we ended up finding out that his fear came from not having his own power. His power center he had not been born with it in this case. When he was in his mother's womb, because his mother lacked so much control within her life, she sort of took it from him when he was still in utero. And I think it's because he was the firstborn as well. A lot of the times the firstborn children will go through a lot of that, or it depends on the relationship that the parents have with the child. if they feel the most closest to, let's say, the youngest child, then they'll probably end up taking it from the youngest child. So with him, it was that he was the firstborn, and that he did make himself very responsible at a young age. And before he was even born, his power center had already been taken from him. So he wasn't able to ever really have his own power within himself throughout his lifetime, right? So amazingly, when we did go through all of this whole process with him and his case, his being able to like just see the release that he had, to see how he was able to be very at ease and very at peace. And mind you, because he was so willing and so open to do this kind of therapy, we went straight to the cause of what it was that was causing him so much ailment, that it happened within, I believe, like 3 or 4 sessions. It was very quick. And he healed so much in such a small amount of time. When he came out of that session, he felt better physically. He said that he had like this tension inside of him, like this pressure inside of him that was so painful that when he breathed, like he was aware of the little, like, it was like little pins and needles that were going like in his kidneys the whole time. He noticed that when he came out of that session, after we had that dialogue with his parents, the pin stopped, the pain stopped, it went away. It wasn't present anymore. And he was able to, like, he even took a deep breath, because he said doing that was painful and he didn't know. He wanted, to be able to heal it. And he said, and he finally, when we were done, he did say that he was very thankful towards me for helping him, because now he was going to wait and see, like, how, if his numbers would change when it came to his kidneys. And I didn't end up seeing him again after that. I do feel like that session was one that he was looking for, and he was able to receive it, and he was able to heal so much from it that was like the main causation of a lot of the issue that was going on with his body physically. And he didn't come back, but I did end up getting a call from his son, about, I believe, 2 or 3 months later. And the son said that he was so very grateful for what I did with him. Whatever therapy, the son wasn't so open to this kind of therapy, so he didn't really believe it. But when he did see the difference with his dad physically, when they finally went to the doctors again and, got tests done, and they did see that his numbers were actually regulating, they were balancing themselves out, he said that it was amazing, because they had looked so long for so many different natural remedies to be able to help him, that even though he didn't believe in this initially, he did believe in it now, and it was so quick too when it happened. It was interesting because with this story, it also came up with how his power center hadn't existed and because it wasn't there, it wasn't present, it caused him to live in a state of such fear that I am honestly amazed that he even lived to be as old as he was at that time, because he carried so much of it and it was manifesting into something physical. Again, after that, I don't know if, he had issues again with his kidneys. I don't know if something else happened to him physically, but that's just the information that I got from the time that I was with him and the update that I got from the son. And I want to believe that, it does the whole mind over matter thing, the placebo effect. It has been researched that the mind is capable of doing incredible things. It can even heal the body. And that's the thing, once we're able to tap into that part of the mind that is able to do this naturally, because our body is always healing, it's always creating new cells. So if we're able to get into the program that is in charge of creating a significant amount of healing within the body, within the cells, why not access it and use it to be able to fully release whatever it is that we don't need anymore, what doesn't serve us anymore. So So that's kind of some food for thought to have. Again, I love the idea of how hypnotherapy, it is such an incredible method of a natural method, an ability that we have, because we always go into a state of hypnosis all the time. Some researchers even believe that we do this like every 2 minutes. As long as you're moving away consciously, your mind is moving away from the here and now. That is a state of hypnosis. And the word in itself, it may be a little bit dramatized, it may be a little bit scary, but another word for hypnosis could be just, being an altered state of awareness. It could be being totally relaxed. It could be being hyper-focused. It's just hypnosis in itself, the word, I think it's created this idea of some kind of manipulation or control that is going on, that it's not, that the person that is in that state isn't aware of it. But that's the thing, is that if this hypnosis, it is a natural state that we all go into, why not take control of it for ourselves? Why not gain the tools to be able to go into this state of hypnosis and create a state of where we can heal, or we can be more positive, or we can do better. So anytime anyone is in a state of hypnosis, again, this is natural, so everyone goes into it. And that's the thing, whenever someone, let's say like a pro athlete, gets into their zone, that is them going into their state of hypnosis. But the thing is, they've practiced it so much, they've gone into that state so many times, that they are able to control it in a way that allows them, when they get into the zone, they can tap into these abilities, either becoming stronger, faster, more focused, whatever it is that they decided to program within that state. That's why, people that tap into that zone of themselves and do it repeatedly, you're practicing it, you're making it stronger. So this is a natural ability that everyone has. And there is no limits to what it is that you can do, to where you can visit, you can go. Even with people that have passed away, loved ones that you wish that you would have had those last moments with, if you're able to go into a deep enough state, you can have a dialogue with them, because energetically, they're always with you. They're in your thoughts, they're in your memories, they're in your energetic field in a way as well. I do thank you for joining me this week, and if you would like to help out the channel, then feel free to sign up as a Patreon member, as we do have a group hypnotherapy session on there every week. I will have all of my social medias down below, and if you feel like you would also like to try a hypnotherapy session with myself one-on-one, that is also available. I will have a link down below. And I do hope that you have a fantastic week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.